Good evening. This is Ashley Johnson at the Vernon Area Library, and I'm excited to welcome our speakers, Leslie Rodriguez and Jenny Terrell with the North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. Today, they are here to lead and talk to us about eviction prevention and the updates on the moratorium going on in the state of Illinois as well as federal government. So before we get started, as always, I like to invite people to the library's website to see other programs that we have coming up. We're still doing a lot of our programming digitally because of COVID, but we are happy to host you digitally, and hopefully it works for you. Please feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A, and we will make time to answer your questions as they come up. We are recording this, so it will be hosted on the library's YouTube page, and if you registered, we will send it out to you along with multiple handouts that Leslie sent to me beforehand. So look out for those. And if it's recorded and we send it to you, we'd love for you to share it with people. So don't be afraid to send it to people that you might know that might find the information useful. So with that, I have just a couple introductions. First, on the North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. The NSLAC aims to provide accessible, quality, pro bono legal services in the areas of immigration, domestic violence, and housing to give those in need of access to justice the opportunity to live productive and secure lives. North Suburban Aid Clinic has been a great partner to the Vernon Area Library, and I highly recommend getting in touch with any of the staff there, along with the staff attorneys, if you have questions in those areas. Our speaker, Leslie Rodriguez, is a housing community navigator for the NSLAC, focusing on community outreach with specific attention to addressing the eviction crisis, which has been heightened by COVID-19. She provides valuable outreach, referrals, and accompaniments for those facing the threat of eviction, and her work complements the legal services provided by the clinic's housing law practice. And that being said, Jenny Terrell is a staff attorney with the group and has a passion for community-based work that advances racial justice. She most recently served as a Skadden Fellow and later Program Counsel at the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights as part of the Voting Rights Project, where she focused on ensuring racial equity in Illinois and Indiana voting practices. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Leslie. I'm going to go dark, but like I said, we are paying attention to the chat. So at any point you have questions, put them in there and we'll get to them, okay? So Leslie, I'm listening though. So if you have problems or anything, just say my name and I will appear. All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. We're going to get started here. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about some updates on the moratoriums, going through some tenant rights, the eviction process, as well as a rental assistance program still available today. This is my, I'm sorry, I should have clicked the presentation mode. So this is my email address, lrodriguez@nslegalaid.org. And this is our staff attorney, Jenny Terrell's address at jterrell@nslegalaid.org. A quick overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be going through the clinic, our mission statement, and the services we provide, followed by an introduction, right? And then going on to the process of eviction, covering policy updates related to COVID, like the state moratorium, as well as the federal CDC moratorium. And then we're going to be wrapping up with rental assistance programs that are still available right now. Our mission, like Ashley mentioned earlier today, is that we aim to provide accessible, quality pro bono legal services in the areas of immigration, domestic violence, and how to give those of access to justice the opportunity to live productive and secure lives. Our clinic consists of 3 practices: our immigration practice, our domestic violence practice, and our housing practice. Jenny both work in the housing practice. This is a list of services that the immigration practice provides to different clients based on their needs and their immigration status. We get a lot of calls from clients just looking to get more information on what their status is and what benefits or petitions they could maybe apply for to help their status. This is a list of services that our domestic violence practice offers. A quick note is that typically we do have an income eligibility criterion for that we have to have clients inform us of. So they have to fall below the 250th percentage of the federal poverty line. For victims of domestic violence, when we get calls from them, we don't ask about income. We service any client who lives in Lake or North Suburban Cook County, regardless of income. And a note for immigration is that for any of our 3 practices, we do service clients regardless of their immigration status. We're going to be covering housing services a little bit later in the presentation, so I'm just going to skip over this slide as we are going to cover it at the end of the presentation. If you'd like to contact us, or if you know someone who would benefit in talking to one of our attorneys, please feel free to give us a call. Our number is 847-737-4042. You can also send us an email at info@nslegalaid.org or visit our website and request an intake appointment at www.nslegalaid.org. We did recently move offices. For the time being, due to COVID, we're not taking in-person meetings or appointments, but we are doing all of those through phone calls. We do speak Spanish, Korean, and Polish at our clinic, but we also have an interpretation service available for clients might speak other languages. Our normal hours of operation are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So please, if you feel like you would benefit from giving us a call, or if you know of someone who could benefit from giving us a call, for them to our website or our phone number and have them contact us. We're going to move on to some tenant rights. All tenants have the right to not be discriminated against. They have the right to live in a habitable home. They have a right to privacy and to receive proper notice. What would it look like to have a right to not be discriminated against? Landlords cannot use your immigration status to intimidate you or to force you to move out. And landlords cannot threaten to call ICE or increase your rent or evict you or shut off your utilities for exercising your rights, as that would be discrimination or retaliation. Tenants have the right to live in a habitable home. This means that they have a right to have essential services that are working and operational. And if that there is any sort of damage or repairs that need to be made, those repairs would have to be made for the cases of emergency repairs like heat, water, and electricity. If tenants have any questions or concerns regarding conditions, repairs, or maintenance responsibilities, they should refer to their lease, as most of that information would be found in their lease. If you as a tenant are experiencing any conditions issues, you should notify your landlord, make a note in writing about what needs to be repaired and give that to them, as well as keep a copy yourself. As a tenant, you have right to privacy. Landlords should give tenants notice before entering their homes. This typically looks like 24 to 48-hour notice prior to visiting the tenant's unit. Except for emergencies, landlords cannot enter a tenant's home without giving them notice. And even when the landlord does present themselves at the tenant's household, they can't just key in. They need to knock like any other person or visitor would have to. When moving into a new apartment or a new unit, you should do a walkthrough with your landlord to make sure that everything's in good conditions, to make sure that everything's working, including appliances and utilities. You should also take pictures and videos of all of the rooms, all of the spaces in the unit to have proof of the condition of the unit when you first moved in case later on there's a problem with conditions and your landlord tries to say that you damaged the unit or tries to keep your security deposit for damages. During your tenancy, you should keep written proof of your rent payments. And if you did pay cash, you should ask for your landlord to give you a receipt. Always make sure to keep those receipts in case later on anything happens, you have proof that you have always kept paying your rent. If there are ever any changes to your lease, make sure to get those changes written and signed by both you and the landlord. And you should always keep a copy of those changes as well. If your landlord happens to decide to sell the building, you should note that you don't have to move out. Your landlord would actually take over your existing lease as well as your security deposit that would be carried over to the new landlord. You should always have your landlord's full name, address, and phone number. And this applies also for when you get a new landlord through the property getting sold. You want to make sure that full name, address. To make sure that you get your security deposit back, you should make sure to move out all of your possessions, clean the unit, and do a walkthrough with your landlord at the end of your tenancy. Make sure to keep photos and videos of the empty unit at the end of your tenancy, just to have evidence of the conditions of the unit once you moved out. Make sure to return the keys and to give your landlord your forwarding address so that they can send you your security deposit back. Now we're going to cover evictions, and Jenny is actually going to cover this portion. So Jenny, whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you, Leslie. Thanks again, Vernon Area Library, for the warm welcome. We're really glad to be here tonight. I'm going to spend a few minutes now just talking generally about the process for an eviction, but I want to caveat this entire part of the presentation by saying, if you receive eviction paperwork or if a friend of yours gets papers related to an eviction, we would really encourage you to call our office, because what I'm going to tell you now is really the general overview of what an eviction looks like, but each person's case is different, and an attorney can really help talk through the specifics of your case and make sure that we're seeing, every possible defense that you might have. So first thing to know is that an eviction is a process. A landlord cannot simply come to your unit and change your locks. They can't come to your apartment and throw your items out on the street. They have to go through the legal formal process to evict a tenant. The first step in that process is called giving notice. And that means a landlord is telling the tenant why they are trying to evict them from the property. The second step would then be actually
Jenny, are you still there?
That was very strange. I fell out for a minute, just put me back in, so I apologize. I was just saying, did you hear the first step in the process, Leslie?
Yes.
Okay, so the second step then would be the landlord actually going to court and filing an eviction case in court. After that, the third process would be actually having the case decided in court, whether that's by trial or decided outside of court through settlement. And then the final step in the process is an actual forcible eviction, which would be carried out by a sheriff. No one besides a sheriff can carry out the forcible eviction. So on the next slide, we talk a little more in depth about the notice piece of the process. Before starting an eviction case, a landlord has to give a tenant notice of why they're trying to terminate the tenancy. That notice has to be in writing. And there are a few other requirements of what has to be included in the notice, how that notice can be given to the tenant. Here are some examples of some common types of notices. So if a landlord is trying to end a tenancy because a tenant hasn't paid rent, the landlord has to give the tenant 5 days notice. And that means within 5 days, the tenant has the opportunity to pay that back rent that's owed. And then the landlord couldn't move forward with the eviction. Similarly, a landlord has to give a 10-day notice for other violations of the lease, or they have to give 30 days notice before ending a month-to-month tenancy. Tenants also should look at their individual leases, because sometimes your lease is going to say something else related to notice, and local ordinances across the state of Illinois might tweak these rules or have additional rules about notice. Similarly, folks who are in subsidized housing, there might be some other requirements for notice for you. The next step in the process then would be the landlord going to file a complaint at eviction court. And a landlord can only do this after the notice period ends. So if the landlord has given a tenant a 5-day notice saying you owe this amount of back rent, and the tenant pays that money back before the 5 days are up, the landlord can't go file a case. But let's say the 5 days pass, the tenant hasn't been able to pay, then the landlord can go to court, they file a complaint, and that's what officially starts the court case. The landlord will also file a summons. And so the summons is the document that will tell the tenant when the court date is and say you have to come to court at this date and at this time. And both the complaint and the summons have to get served on the tenant. That means they have to be given to the tenant in a formal way by someone besides the landlord. So on the next slide, we show a sample of what a summons in Lake County looks like. And the part that's highlighted in yellow is the section that tells the tenant when and where they have to go to court. You'll notice right now, all of court is over Zoom. And we think it's going to stay like that for a while because of COVID, but at some point it will go back to being in person. So the third step in the process is actually going to court. And what does that look like? Well, first, the most important thing is the tenant has to show up to that court date that's put on the summons. Even if the tenant is just going to court and saying, "Judge, I request a continuance so I can get an attorney." It's really important that the tenant shows up to court. There can be a trial in the eviction case. And if there is a trial, the tenant has the opportunity to try to raise defenses to the eviction. And that again is something that an attorney can really help pinpoint what defenses might be applicable to a given tenant situation. Another option is a tenant and a landlord can work out a settlement and not have to actually go through the trial process. So a settlement might be that a tenant agrees to a payment plan to pay back any money owed. So each month they're paying both that month's rent plus an additional amount from a payment plan. Or it might be that the landlord and the tenant agree that the tenant will move out, but they set the date together and they set any other conditions around that move out. Now, let's say in court, the case does go to trial and the tenant loses the trial and the judge enters an eviction order against the tenant. So this is a sample of what an eviction order might look like. There's a couple different things that can be in that order. One is the court can order that the tenant has to pay the landlord money, and that's called entering a money judgment against the tenant. So that would often be for back rent that's owed. Another possibility is the order can give possession of the unit back to the landlord by a certain date. So that's basically saying, tenant, you have to move out by this date. And if you don't move out by that time, then the landlord can officially go to the sheriff and have the sheriff forcibly remove the tenant and their property from the premises. And the next slide just shows a zoomed in portion of that eviction order. It's just highlighting where the order states a date that a tenant would have to leave up the property or an amount of money that a tenant might owe to their landlord. Now, one final piece about evictions that we want to talk about today is sealing an eviction. So for a tenant, even if a landlord files an eviction case against a tenant and later drops it, or later the case gets settled, or the tenant wins the case, just the fact that that case was ever filed can actually make it much more difficult for a tenant who's looking for that next apartment to rent. Because a lot of times when landlords are doing background checks, They're checking court records to see if an eviction case has been filed against a tenant, and they're not really looking at the outcome of the case. This is where sealing a record can be really helpful, because sealing an eviction case means that it's not available in the public record. So a landlord shouldn't be able to just look it up and see that this was filed against you. Now, if there's a money judgment entered against you, that might still show up on your credit report. But again, this should make it difficult for the landlord to find that the case existed. Because of COVID, all residential evictions that have been filed or will be filed from March 9th, 2020 to March 21st, 2022 are going to be automatically sealed. Otherwise, Illinois recently passed a new law that made the requirements for a tenant to seal an eviction case easier than they have been in the past. So if you are a tenant who has an eviction case on your record, I would encourage you also to call our office so that we could explore with you whether you might be able to have that case sealed now, even if you couldn't get it sealed in the past. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Leslie.
Thank you, Jenny. So now we're going to cover some policy updates regarding COVID. We're going to start off with the Illinois State Moratorium, what it is, what it offers in terms of protections, and how long it'll last. The Illinois State Moratorium and courts prevent the eviction of covered persons. These are individuals who have been unable to pay their rent due to COVID-related loss of income. This protection will remain until the 1st of September of 2021 for covered individuals, covered persons. Who is a covered person and can sign a declaration? Well, a covered person is any tenant, leasee, subleasee, or resident who gives their landlord declaration attest following statements. The first statement is that you have a lower income. Your income does not surpass $99,000. Then there is the statement of experience with loss of income. This can be due to a work hours, you lost your job due to COVID, you experienced some increase in out-of-pocket expenses directly related to COVID. The third statement is that you have been attempting to make partial payments to the best of your efforts. You've been attempting to make timely partial payments as close to full as your circumstances permit, taking into consideration your non-discretionary expenses. Non-discretionary expenses are things like food, utilities, phone and internet bills, school supplies. And finally, you would attest that if you were to be evicted, you would most likely become homeless or have to share a house with either a friend or another family member, meaning you would move in with another family and increase your risk of becoming sick with COVID. Can I be evicted right now for owing rent? Covered persons cannot be physically evicted for not paying rent right now, but they can have eviction cases filed again. And this protection of not being able to be physically evicted only stands in place for covered persons, persons who have submitted a declaration to their landlords. The state moratorium is set to expire on the 21st of August, but no eviction judgments can occur until the 1st of September. And then eviction orders can only be enforced by the sheriffs, and the actual sheriff is the only person who could physically evict you. There are some exceptions that made protections of covered persons, and this would be if either the tenant poses a direct threat to the health and safety of other tenants, or if the tenant is in immediate or severe risk. I see that we have a question in the chat, and it reads, if you are evicted, does this go on a public record? Jenny, do you want to go ahead and answer this?
Yes, great question. So usually an eviction is a court case that can be publicly found and that landlords can look up. But right now, because of COVID, any case that has been filed from March 9th of 2020 through mid-March of 2022 is automatically sealed, so it will not be on a public record. A landlord would not be able to find it. And then even if you do have a case that has that was filed outside of that range, you might have the opportunity to seal it. And I would encourage you to call us if you have a question about that.
Thank you, Jenny. Continuing on with the presentation. Oh, we have, no problem. How does a tenant get a declaration, and when or how should they give it to their landlord? A landlord is supposed to give their tenants a copy of the declaration to complete 5 days before they issue a notice of termination and filed an eviction case in court. But if your landlord doesn't give you a declaration to complete, you as a tenant can also get a copy of the declaration form on IDA's website. I'm sorry. Yeah, so you can find a declaration form online and submit it to your landlord. To give the declaration to your landlord, you should fill out the declaration in paper copy so that you can have proof that they actually have it. You text or email by certified or your land of a witness. Regardless, a tenant should keep a copy, a written and signed copy of the declaration just for their safekeeping and as evidence that they filled it out. And every adult member of the household should submit their own declaration. What happens when the Illinois state moratorium ends? And are there any protections that can protect someone that's currently facing eviction? There does exist a federal CDC moratorium. The CDC issued a nationwide eviction moratorium that halts evictions for covered persons. And this was issued on the 3rd of August of 2021. The CDC moratorium will go into full effect in Illinois when the state moratorium expires. So these are two separate moratoriums. Previously, we talked about the state moratorium, the Illinois state moratorium. Right now, we're talking about the CDC federal moratorium. This order is set to expire on the 3rd of October of the year, but is subject to further extension, modification, or being rescinded based on public health circumstances. Okay. I see that we have another question in the chat box.
Yeah, did you want me to read that to you?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, it says, is there any recourse for individuals whose lease does not get renewed? I've had clients after applying for CARES assistance that have their landlord serve them with non-renewal of lease notice. My assumption is the landlord is basing this decision on the fact that the client is applying for assistance and may not be able to pay rent moving forward.
Good question.
So I'll just jump in there. So in general, a landlord doesn't have to have any reason to not renew a lease. So unfortunately, there really isn't any recourse. I don't know with the clients you're working with, there might be some extenuating circumstances, but in general, no, that the landlord just has the right to not renew a lease at the end of the lease.
Thank you, Jenny. Continuing on with the presentation, who is a covered person who can receive the protections under the CDC moratorium and can actually sign a declaration? A covered person under the CDC moratorium is any tenant, leasee, subleasee, or resident who gives their landlord a declaration attesting of the following statements. Most of these statements are actually very similar to the ones that we covered for the state moratorium. The two differences or statements that differ from the last list that we went through is the second bullet point, which states that you have exhausted all other options. As a tenant, you have, to the best of your ability, tried to obtain all available governmental assistance for renter housing. This means that you applied for rental assistance and were denied, or are still waiting for your application to be reviewed and processed. It could also be that you have applied and been accepted, that told that you will receive funds to help cover your rent, but you have yet to actually receive those funds, or your landlord has not yet received the rental assistance that you're waiting on. And then the second point that differs is the last bullet point, that your county COVID transmission levels have to be either at a substantial or high rate of community transmission levels. This basically means that at present moment, your county, the county in which you reside in, is experiencing a substantial or high rate of COVID transmissions as defined by the CDC. How do I stay up to date on my county's COVID transmission levels? COVID transmission levels are updated very frequently. Tenants should refer to the the CDC COVID data tracker to monitor their county updates. Being that the federal CDC order covers tenants in Illinois counties that are currently experiencing higher substantial transmissions. If your county were to fall below that, you may not be offered the protections that you would be if your county was experiencing a higher substantial transmission level. Any county that is not currently at a higher substantial transmission level, but becomes so, will be protected by the order on the day that it reaches that level. But if the county is not at a higher substantial transmission level for 14 consecutive days, the order stops applying until that county reaches a high or substantial level again. How does a tenant get a CDC declaration, and when or how should they give it to their landlord? Similar to the declaration form for the Illinois state moratorium, to qualify for protections of the order, tenants have to provide a completed and signed copy of the declaration that lists the definition of a covered person to prevent them from being evicted or removed from where they live. Tenants can get a copy of the declaration form by visiting the CDC's website. They actually have multiple declaration forms in different languages. So if you know someone who is worried that they want to sign a declaration but might not find one in their language, there are a bunch of them in different languages. And if you do contact an agency, someone can always translate the document for you. But the English version can be found on this link. And I will be sharing these presentation slides later with Ashley. So if you'd like to refer back to these slides to use URL on this presentation slide, feel free to visit back later. To give the declaration, a tenant has to give it to their landlord in a way that they would have proof demonstrating that they actually gave it to them. This could be either by text, mail, certified mail, or in front of witnesses. Again, tenants should keep a copy, and every adult member of the household should submit their own declaration. Now we're going to move on to rental assistance programs. Currently, the IHDA, IDA, the Illinois Rental Payment Program, is not currently accepting applications, but they are reviewing and processing applications from the last 2 rounds of rental assistance. Applicants can check on the status of their applications at the website for IDA, and they can use their application ID or zip code. They can also call the call center, the helpline, at 866-454-3571 to receive more information about their application. For the Illinois Department of Human Services, they are offering a program called the Illinois Housing Help. It's still ongoing right now. It covers the entire state of Illinois, so anyone that lives in Illinois can apply if they are seeking rental assistance and are someone and is a person who has been impacted financially by COVID. To apply, they do have to have a referral from an IDHS partner or partnering agency. You can give IDHS a call at 312-793-1546 to get connected. They'd be able to refer you to an agency that's local to you. You can also visit the website. They have a list of agencies broken down by counties so that people in different counties can find information on agencies that are local to them. The Illinois Housing Help Program provides assistance with rent payment. It also covers limited utilities like water, light, gas, internet, and a phone bill, of course. And there is no maximum amount of assistance that they can provide, but they do have a cap on how the term of which they can apply or you can apply for. You can apply for up to 12 months of past rent and 3 months of future rent. So that means 15 months in total. This is a list of eligibility. You have to be behind on rent for at least 30 days, live in the state of Illinois, be under the 80th percentage of the area median income, and face a financial hardship due to COVID. To apply, you don't have to declare your immigration status. It doesn't matter. You don't have to put in your social security number. But priority is being immigrants, refugees, and households with mixed status. Finally, you do have to provide proof that you experienced a hardship due to COVID. This is a list of documentation that your landlord has to provide during the course of the application process. This information can be found on the website for the Illinois Housing Help Program. It's listed there. The partnering agency of IDHS, which would be giving you the referral, would also inform your landlord and you as a tenant, the applicant, of what sort of documentation the landlord would have to provide. Tenants also have to provide certain documents to apply for the Illinois Housing Help Program. This is a list of documentation that tenants have to give. It is also found on the website. So if you have to refer to this later, you can visit these presentation slides again later on, or you can visit their website as well. There are other options for rental assistance. You can always call your townships. Sometimes there is general assistance or emergency assistance available for residents of specific townships. So I always recommend that you reach out to if you are experiencing difficulties. The Illinois Housing Development Authority, IDA, which is the program we first started talking about, is having a third round of rental assistance. They've already had 2 rounds. They're going through those applications, reviewing them and approving them or rejecting them. But they are projected to have a third round of rental assistance open sometime in September. To find more information, you can visit this website. There also exists the Federal Emergency Rental Assistance of Lake County program. It's still accepting applications for rental assistance. If you'd like more information on this program, please call 211. This program specifically is only for residents of Lake County. And if you would like more information before giving them a call, you can always visit their website as well by going to Lake County IF. It does pop up as one of the side options when you initially visit their website. Housing referrals to the North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. We do have a couple of requirements for eligibility purposes. We do require that our clients be below 250% of the federal poverty level. Income varies depending on the size of your family. If you have a bigger family, you'd obviously have more income than someone that's like a family of 2 or 3. So we take that into consideration. We require that the tenants that we assist either be renting in private or subsidized housing. The tenants must also live in Lake County or North Suburban Cook County. And if we are assisting you with an eviction case, that eviction case has to occur at the Skokie, Rolling Meadows, or Waukegan courthouses. Finally, I just want to emphasize that we do accept and represent undocumented clients. The types of cases that we as the housing practice can assist with are cases like evictions, any sort of landlord-tenant disputes, issues related to conditions and repairs. We also assist clients who are looking to break out of a lease. If you are currently struggling to pay your rent due to COVID and looking to apply to rental assistance programs, but you don't really know much about how to do that or would like more information, give us a call at the clinic. We can help you apply and fill out those applications. We also assist with illegal walkouts. We help clients who are looking to get their security deposit backs. We help individuals who have received notice of termination from their subsidy, or clients who are just looking for reasonable accommodations. And with that, I just want to emphasize again to please reach out to us if you are facing any sort of housing issue. This is our number, 847-737-4042. Again, you can give us a call or visit our website to schedule an appointment. Thank you so much for coming tonight. If you have any questions, you can either share them in the chat and we will answer them.
All right, there are a few. Well, people are saying thank you. It is such valuable information. You guys just do so much. And like I said, you've been a great partner to the library. And every time I work with any of you, I'm like, God, they're just such great people over there. I love you guys. So please reach out to them. In my experience, they've been very responsive and obviously kind when I do need to talk to them about anything. So visit their website and feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. And as I mentioned, this will be on the website, and all of the documents and handouts that Leslie had shared with me beforehand, I will include that in the email to registrants, and along with the link to the YouTube for all of our viewers to share with their network to help other people that might need the information. So with that, we can close our evening program, and I thank you both very much for your time and all the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having us tonight.
Good night.